Thank you. Let's move to a foreign policy question. We begin with Mr. Adcock. Regarding the Iranian threat to build a nuclear bomb, and specifically beyond that, a deliverable nuclear bomb, and that it takes many months to position forces, naval forces and others, to accomplish a blockade, do you agree that America should begin to plan now to quarantine Iranian oil imports and weapons exports?
Yes.
And under what circumstances, what would be the trigger mechanism that you would say now's the time to do it? Whether it's today, a month from now, 6 months.
To do it, as in a...
Actually put them in, because the question was plan to quarantine. Would you actually enact that any time in the foreseeable future?
Let's go back a moment. If we're going to talk about Iran, that is a real and serious danger, obviously, not only to the free world, primarily to Israel. Iran already has missiles that can reach Israel. Putting nuclear weapons on that could threaten the very existence of Israel. That is not an acceptable alternative. It's certainly not acceptable to Israel, and it's not acceptable, I believe, to one of Israel's strong friends and allies in us, the United States. There were opportunities early on when there was an uprising of the people against the government of Iran. We did not, we being the federal government, our leadership, did not support that uprising when it could have had a real effect. The effort to put any boycott against them has seemed to have fallen by the wayside, and we're running out of time and running out of options.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hawken, your response.
Thank you. I actually agree with you on this. I would support an embargo or quarantine of Iran. They more than a handful of times spit in the face of our strongest ally over there in Israel. I feel that they're striving for long-range nuclear weapons. We all know that they are. I feel we have such a lack of leadership in Washington right now that that's not going to happen anytime soon. And if I'm sent down to Washington, I would support immediately. I would support the initiative of an embargo on Iran.
Mr. Clinton, your response.
The answer is yes, I would support it, and I would support it right now. And the reason for that is very simple. This problem is not going away. We've been fighting this war since 1983, whether we want to admit it or not, when they bombed barracks in Beirut. There's been two developments in the last 6 months that are absolutely crucial to understanding this issue. Number one, the Iranians have now developed a third-generation nuclear reactor, which means they can get the weapons-grade material much faster than we originally expected. Number two, they're trying to buy one of the most sophisticated anti-aircraft systems in the world from the Russians. Why would you be buying that system if you did not have something to protect? The answer is very simple. We have to do everything in our power right now, starting tomorrow, to stop the Iranians from getting nuclear weapons.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question since Israel was mentioned in there. And this has to do with the Middle East peace process. And obviously that's not a simple process, but I'm in the media, so we ask simple questions and get simple answers. If you could do one thing, or if you could describe in one sentence, the key ingredient, the one thing that has to get done if there's going to be peace long-term in the Middle East, what would it be? And let's go in the order they're seated. Mr. Adcock.
Peace in the Middle East in one sentence.
Yeah.
Hey, that should be easy. I would point out that our problems with Iran really went all the way back to the hostage-taking, slightly before the barracks bombing. But the only peace in the Middle East that I could foresee would be peace through strength if we're talking human means.
Strong.
It's one of those questions, I'm sure we're all on the same page. Same thing. Peace through strength. Support of Israel. Get behind our allies.
I actually think it's a little more complex than that. I think peace through strength is part of it. But one of the things we have to figure out how to do in the Middle East is bring stability. Stability is the key. And if we continue to promote our ideals and stand up for uprisings in Iran, and support people who are trying to bring freedom and stability, that's where the key is.
None of you said that the Arab states recognize the right of Israel to exist. Any reason that you think that's not the fundamental, crucial, central pillar of any Middle East peace process?
I certainly think it's part of it, but I don't think that that's the only beef that the Arabs and Muslims in that part of the world have. I mean, let's face it, one of the big problems we face with Iran is they want hegemony of the entire region. They're not just out to get the Israelis, they're out to get the Iraqis, they're out to get the Kuwaitis, and the Saudis.
Mr. Auden?
The entire region said that they would like to see Israel wipe out the face of the map. That answers the question right there. They don't see a right of Israel to exist.
Mr. Eckman?
There have been small progress in peace there, certainly with Egypt and Israel. I believe their right to exist has been acknowledged there. But in the Palestinian area, the fact is the Israelis have already compromised, and that compromise has only led to Hamas, Hezbollah, and other terrorist organizations ending up leading those areas in the Palestinian state.
Thank you, sir. Domestic question now. We begin the answer with Mr. Houghton. Regarding using stimulus money to provide personal and corporate welfare, and that a jobless recovery would prompt prolonged unemployment compensation and corporate bank bailouts, do you agree that the government cannot remain passive as so many citizens remain unemployed and underemployed?
Essentially what you're asking me is, do I agree with the stimulus package and how it was pushed on the American people?
You can take it any way you like.
That's how I'm going to take it. The stimulus package was a joke. It didn't provide jobs. It didn't provide long-term jobs. The unemployment rate's still over 10% right now. And we're starting to get comfortable with it above 10%. I don't believe in too big to fail. My business is not too big to fail. His business is not too big to fail. His business is not too big to fail. I'm not going to get a bailout if my establishment starts to go under. It's not going to happen. I believe in capitalism, plain and simple. I believe in the spirit and the ingenuity of the American worker, the American people. I think we're going to dig ourselves out of this mess, because that's just who we are. We're hardworking, strong, white-collar, blue-collar American people. The United States government doesn't need to take our hard-earned tax money and redistribute it and raise our taxes and redistribute it into pet projects that they have throughout the country. Thank you.
Mr. Houghton, thank you. Mr. Putter, you get to begin the response.
I think the answer to the question depends on how you define passive. I certainly would completely disagree with the stimulus package. Government spending doesn't work. If you look back in history, the Secretary of the Treasury for Roosevelt, when they tried this in the 40s, said to himself, "We have spent millions of dollars. It does not work." The answer is not more spending. The answer is government get out of the way. We're not going to recover until the private sector is back growing again. The pre-recession layoff rate is back to pretty close to where it was before we had this spell in 2007. The problem is the private sector is not growing. Nobody's hiring, and they're not hiring because they've got too many things coming at them. They got this health care bill they don't know how they're going to pay for. Card checks coming down the road. Cap and trades coming down the road. And business owners are going, I'm not going to do anything that's going to require me to hire 10 people now and lay them off in a year. So the answer is government get out of the way. So if you want to define that as passive, I guess it would be passive. But I think less government involvement now is the answer, more private sector.
And Mr. Antcott, you get to respond.
I also was against the stimulus bill. It was just a pork project that unfortunately the president used to pay off many of his supporters and buy political favor. We should not be involved in the private sector from the federal government. The too big to fail, that's on the financial side, but regarding the stimulus package, when the government is taking so much money and producing so much debt, there is no remaining capital in the private sector to grow the economy. When the government is setting new regulations, as a businessman, I can compare the risk to the reward. That's what any investment is. And as they tax me more, my reward is declining, and the risk is increasing because there are so many things that are unknown in that health care bill by itself. As Nancy Pelosi said, we have to sign it so we can see what's in it.